The Mongol Empire, unstoppable, unrelenting, unmatched. From the freezing steppes of Mongolia to the deserts of Persia, no power had ever resisted its advance for long. By the mid-13th century, under the rule of Kublai Khan, grandson of Genghis Khan, the empire stretched from the Caspian Sea to the Pacific. Kingdoms fell like dominoes, their rulers kneeling before the great Khan. But in the tropical south, beyond the misty jungles and winding rivers, lay a small kingdom that refused to bow. Dai Viet, the land we know today as Vietnam. What could possibly stop the most feared army in history? Certainly not numbers, not wealth, and definitely not power. Yet, what the Mongols didn't know was that their greatest enemy wasn't a mighty army or an impregnable fortress. It was something far more subtle and far deadlier. In the year 1257, Kublai Khan ordered one of his most trusted commanders, Dai, son of the legendary Subutai, to subdue Dai Viet. Dai's reputation was as fearsome as his father's. He led an army of roughly 40,000 men, hardened warriors drawn from Mongolia and the conquered kingdom of Dali, in present-day Yunnan. Their mission was simple: crush the Tran dynasty and open a southern corridor into the Song territories of China. But as they descended into the steaming valleys of northern Vietnam, they were about to learn that Dai Viet was unlike any other battlefield they had faced. The Vietnamese king, Tran Thai Tong, knew that surrender meant the end of his people's independence. When Mongol envoys arrived demanding submission to Kublai Khan, the king had them imprisoned, a declaration of defiance that sealed the fate of his kingdom. The Tran court braced for invasion. Villagers evacuated the lowlands, burning crops and supplies in their wake. The land itself became a weapon, stripped bare to starve the invaders. This was the beginning of Vietnam's secret weapon: total war through attrition, deception, and terrain mastery. By November, the Mongol vanguard crossed the border along the Red River, their banners cutting through the fog. The campaign began in silence. The Vietnamese armies did not meet them head-on. Instead, the invaders marched through abandoned villages, their supplies dwindling under the humid air. When they finally encountered the defenders at Bin Nguyen, near the Pho Day River, the Tran army had chosen the perfect battlefield. The terrain was narrow and treacherous, flanked by thick forests and the slow-moving river that gleamed like a serpent under the sun. Tran Thai Tong himself commanded the troops alongside his general, Tran Hung Dao's ancestor, Tran Kien. Around 60,000 soldiers stood ready, infantry, archers, and war elephants clad in armor. When the Mongols advanced, the Vietnamese unleashed their first counterstroke. The ground thundered as elephants charged forward, their tusks gleaming, trampling through the river shallows and smashing into the front line of the Mongol cavalry. For a brief, breathtaking moment, the Mongol horde, the terror of Eurasia, hesitated. But Dai was Subutai's son, and hesitation was death. He ordered his archers to target the elephant's eyes. The sky darkened with arrows. Blinded and in agony, the beasts turned on their own lines, wreaking chaos among the Vietnamese ranks. The order crumbled. The Mongols charged, striking with the precision and speed that had broken empires. The Vietnamese fell back toward the river, desperate to regroup. Amid the chaos, King Tran Thai Tong was urged to retreat to preserve the dynasty. While his soldiers fought valiantly, the battlefield became a slaughter. Yet their resistance bought time. From the riverbank, the young Prince Tran Hoang directed defensive fire from warships, covering the retreat as flaming arrows soared over the water. The air was thick with smoke and screams. By nightfall, the plains of Bin Len Nguyen were littered with corpses, and the Red River ran dark with blood. Uriyangqadai's army pushed south toward the capital, Phang Long, modern-day Hanoi. But victory came with a curse. Everywhere they marched, they found emptiness. Villages burned, granaries looted, wells poisoned. When the Mongols finally entered the capital on January 18th, 1258, they found nothing but silence. The royal palace was stripped bare, its halls echoing only the cries of 3 prisoners, Kublai's own envoys, left to die as a grim reminder. The victory was hollow. The land had turned against them. The heat and humidity gnawed at the soldiers' strength. Mosquitoes spread fever through their camps. Food spoiled within days. The mighty Mongol horses, unaccustomed to the tropics, began to die in droves. The further they advanced, the weaker they became. The Vietnamese, meanwhile, melted into the jungles, striking from the shadows, archers hidden in trees, villagers ambushing supply trains, local militias flooding the trails with traps. The terrain itself was the great equalizer, swallowing the empire's might in mud and mist. As days turned to weeks, Uriyangqadai realized he was not facing an army, but an entire nation united in resistance. The enemy refused to meet him in open battle, yet they were everywhere. Exhausted, diseased, and starving, his men began to die, not from swords, but from the land itself. And then came the storm, the moment when Dai Viet turned defense into retribution. King Tran Tai Tong regrouped his forces along the lower Red River, bolstered by local militias and a rejuvenated navy. His nephew, the brilliant strategist Tran Quang Khai, helped devise a counteroffensive that would strike not with brute force, but with precision and cunning. The rivers of Vietnam, labyrinthine, unpredictable, would become their battlefield. On the night of January 28th, 1258, under the cover of mist and silence, hundreds of warships glided downstream like ghosts. Their torches were extinguished, their oars wrapped in cloth. When they reached the Mongol encampment near the river bank, the order was given. The drums roared to life. Fire arrows streaked across the sky, setting ablaze the tents and siege equipment. The river glowed with reflections of flame. The Mongols, caught in confusion, scrambled to mount their horses, but it was too late. Vietnamese forces surged ashore, striking with coordinated precision. The Red River turned into a trap, its currents pulling bodies and wreckage downstream as chaos consumed the camp. The invincible Mongol army was crumbling in the dark. At dawn, the battlefield was unrecognizable. Smoke rose in thick pillars over the Red River as the remnants of Uriyangqadai's army struggled to regroup. The Mongols, who once prided themselves on order and discipline, were now trapped in panic. Their horses flailed in the mud, their armor rusted under the relentless humidity, and their arrows soaked from the rain. The Vietnamese assault had come and gone like a phantom tide, striking fast, vanishing faster. When the light broke over the horizon, the invaders saw what they feared most. The jungle itself had closed around them. Uriyangqadai knew what had to be done. Retreat was the only option. He ordered his men north toward the border, following the Red River upstream. But every step of that retreat was a nightmare. The locals, once invisible, now became shadows of vengeance. Entire villages turned into ambush points. Farmers disguised as traders attacked supply convoys. Fishermen lured Mongol scouts onto boats only to drown them midstream. Each river crossing, each mountain pass, bled the army further. The Mongols had faced deserts, snowfields, and citadels, but never a war like this. This wasn't combat, it was erosion. Dai Viet's secret weapon wasn't just its army, it was time. The longer the Mongols stayed, the more the land devoured them. Soldiers fell ill from malaria and dysentery, while their horses starved on rotting grass. By the time the remnants reached the Chinese border, fewer than a third remained. The empire that had shattered kingdoms was now fleeing from farmers and fishermen. Historical records differ on how many survived. Persian historian Rashid al-Din claimed fewer than 5,000 out of 40,000 returned alive. Chinese sources suggest 13,000. Either way, the message was clear. The unthinkable had happened. The Mongol war machine had been broken not by force, but by adaptation. Back in Thang Long, the Vietnamese returned to a capital of ashes. The Tran dynasty, though battered, stood undefeated. The people rebuilt their homes, and the king, once seen as cautious, was now celebrated as a savior. Yet for all their triumph, there was no celebration. They knew the Mongols would return, and Kublai Khan, enraged by the humiliation, would not forgive. For nearly 3 decades, the empire plotted revenge. In 1285, the second Mongol invasion began. This time, Kublai sent his nephew Togon with an army exceeding 100,000 men. Mongols, Chinese, Koreans, and Central Asians combined. It was no longer a raid. It was an extermination campaign. The Mongols advanced by land and sea, determined to crush Dai Viet completely. But Vietnam had evolved too. The Tran dynasty, led now by the brilliant Prince Tran Hung Dao, had studied every Mongol tactic. He knew that the enemy relied on momentum, mobility, and psychological terror. So he built a strategy that would smother all three. Tran Hung Dao's genius lay not in brute strength, but in patience. Instead of defending every inch of land, he ordered a tactical withdrawal, evacuating cities and burning resources once again. When Togon's army marched into the lowlands, they found nothing but scorched fields and poisoned wells. The Mongols advanced deeper, unaware that they were walking into the same labyrinth that had destroyed Uriyangqadai 27 years earlier. Then, the rivers came alive once more. Vietnamese fleets, smaller but faster, harassed Mongol supply ships relentlessly. Entire convoys vanished overnight. The invaders, spread too thin, could not maintain supply lines. In the steamy jungles and flooded deltas, horses sank into the mud, armor rusted, and morale crumbled. By the time the Mongols reached the Red River Delta, their numbers had already dwindled. In a decisive move, Tran Hung Dao unleashed the counterattack that would define his legacy. Near the Bok Dang River, a narrow and winding estuary that connected to the sea, he prepared an ambush unlike anything the Mongols had ever seen. Vietnamese soldiers drove hundreds of wooden stakes into the riverbed, each tipped with iron. At low tide, the stakes were hidden beneath the water's surface. The plan was simple: lure the Mongol fleet into the trap, then let the tide finish them. On the morning of April 9th, 1288, the trap was sprung. As the tide receded, Togon's fleet found itself impaled on the forest of stakes. Their ships splintered, their troops thrown into chaos. From both riverbanks, Vietnamese warships descended, unleashing volleys of flaming arrows. The river burned as oil and wood caught fire, turning the entire estuary into a graveyard. The Mongols tried to flee, but the tide had turned against them, literally. By nightfall, thousands were dead or captured. Togon barely escaped with his life. It was a total annihilation. The third and final Mongol invasion of Vietnam had failed. When news reached Kublai Khan, silence fell across his court. The great Khan, ruler of the largest empire in history, had failed 3 times to conquer a nation smaller than one of his provinces. The jungles of Dai Viet had proven more formidable than the walls of Baghdad or the armies of China. The empire that had once believed itself invincible had met its match, not in might, but in mastery of the land. For the Vietnamese, these victories were not just military triumphs. They were the preservation of identity. Dai Viet remained free, a beacon of resistance in an age of submission. Tran Hung Dao became a national hero, worshipped as a god of war, his strategies still studied centuries later. His words, preserved in chronicles, captured the spirit that had carried his people through 3 invasions. Better to die for our country than live in shame. As the Mongols faded into the north, the Red River flowed quietly again, carrying with it the ashes of empire and the memory of defiance. Dai Viet's victory had rewritten history. It proved that the greatest weapon isn't forged from steel or fire, but from unity, patience, and knowledge of one's land. If this story of how Vietnam defeated the greatest empire on earth inspired you, make sure to subscribe for more deep dives into the forgotten battles that shaped our world. Share your thoughts below. Was it courage or strategy that truly saved Dai Viet? Thanks for watching. And until next time, keep exploring the hidden wars of history. The Mongol Empire's defeat in Vietnam wasn't just a story of victory. It was the birth of a legend. Across the world, the Mongols had become synonymous with unstoppable power. They had conquered cities surrounded by stone, fortresses defended by tens of thousands, and empires that had lasted for centuries. Yet, in the humid jungles of Southeast Asia, they found their limits. What happened in Dai Viet would echo for generations, whispered as proof that even the strongest armies could drown in a land that refused to yield. After the disaster at Bac Dung River in 1288, the once fearsome Mongol fleet lay shattered. Burnt hulls floated downstream, their masts like skeletal arms reaching toward the sky. The survivors who managed to crawl onto the muddy banks were hunted down by villagers armed with spears and farming tools. It was a sight no chronicler of Kublai Khan could spin into triumph. The invincible empire had been humiliated, not once, but 3 times, by a nation whose total population could fit into one of their conquered cities. Tran Hung Dao stood at the river's edge as the sun rose over the smoldering remains. His army, drenched in sweat and blood, looked more like farmers than soldiers. But they had done what no other power had achieved. They had forced the Mongols to kneel. Yet, even in victory, the general's expression was solemn. He knew the cost. Thousands of Vietnamese lives had been lost defending their homeland. Villages burned, crops destroyed, families scattered. Still, their resilience had paid off. The rivers that had once threatened to drown their fields had now become the graves of their enemies. Back in the north, Kublai Khan's fury was immeasurable. His empire, though vast, was bleeding on multiple fronts. The failed invasions of Japan, Java, and now Dai Viet had stretched his resources thin. Advisors urged him to retaliate again, to reclaim his empire's honor. But for the first time in his reign, Kublai hesitated. The logistics alone were unbearable. Every attempt to invade Vietnam had ended the same way, with starvation, disease, and ruin. The terrain was too hostile, the climate too unforgiving, and the people too united. He quietly withdrew his armies from the southern frontier. The southern barbarians, as Mongol chroniclers once called them, had proven themselves unconquerable. The key to Vietnam's survival was its understanding of asymmetry. The Tran dynasty didn't need to defeat the Mongols in open combat. They only needed to outlast them. Their strategy turned weakness into power. The Vietnamese army was smaller, less equipped, and often outnumbered. But they knew their rivers, forests, and mountains better than any map could show. Every path, every current, every seasonal flood was a weapon. When the Mongols came with their horses and heavy armor, Vietnam answered with mud, rain, and silence. Historians today often refer to Dai Viet's defense as one of the earliest examples of total warfare. Every citizen became part of the resistance. Fishermen became saboteurs, farmers became scouts, and monks carried messages through hidden mountain trails. Even the natural world seemed to side with them. The humidity rusted Mongol weapons. Tropical fevers decimated their troops, and monsoon rains washed away entire supply lines. The empire that had crushed civilizations across continents was now being undone by water and willpower. Tran Hung Dao's legacy became immortal. He was not only a general, but a philosopher of war. In his writings, he emphasized that to conquer the enemy, one must first conquer oneself. He taught that understanding your land and your people was the foundation of invincibility. Centuries later, his teachings would be studied by revolutionaries and commanders who faced their own foreign invaders. From the Mongolian emperors to the 20th century resistance movements, his spirit endured. A reminder that no empire, however mighty, could break the resolve of a united nation. In the years following the Mongol invasions, Dai Viet entered a golden age of reconstruction. The Tran dynasty restored trade, agriculture, and education. Monasteries that had been burned were rebuilt as centers of learning. The Red River Delta, once drenched in blood, returned to its tranquil rhythm of rice harvests and festivals. Songs and poems immortalized the victories, and the names of Tran Hung Dao and Tran Quang Khai were spoken with reverence. Vietnam had not only defended its land, it had forged a national identity in the process. But perhaps the most profound victory was psychological. The Mongol myth of invincibility was shattered. News of their defeat in Dai Viet spread across Asia. From Korea to Persia, smaller kingdoms saw hope where there had once been fear. If a tropical kingdom could survive 3 invasions from the greatest military force in history, perhaps the Mongols were not gods after all. This realization weakened the aura of dominance that had sustained the empire's expansion for decades. Kublai Khan, once seen as untouchable, began to lose control over his distant territories. By the early 14th century, the Mongol Empire was fracturing. Internal rebellions, financial strain, and constant warfare eroded its strength. Dai Viet, on the other hand, continued to thrive, a living testament to the power of strategy over strength. The Vietnamese secret weapon had not been a sword, a general, or even an army. It was the land itself, wielded by a people who refused to surrender. Even today, the story of the Mongol invasions of Vietnam stands as one of history's great paradoxes. How the largest empire in the world was undone by one of the smallest nations it sought to conquer. It reminds us that true power doesn't always lie in numbers or weapons, but in understanding one's environment, one's people, and one's purpose. The jungles of Vietnam didn't just swallow an army. They buried the illusion of Mongol invincibility. Centuries later, the same rivers that once carried war would carry commerce, culture, and peace. The lessons of Tran Hung Dao lived on in every generation that faced overwhelming odds. His memory became more than history. It became faith. A faith in the unyielding spirit of Vietnam. In the decades that followed the Mongol invasions, the Tran dynasty stood as a symbol of endurance. The world beyond Dai Viet changed rapidly. Empires rose and fell, dynasties shifted, and conquerors claimed new lands. But the Vietnamese remembered the years when their rivers had burned and their soil had swallowed the mightiest warriors on earth. They didn't just survive, they thrived. The scars of war became foundations of pride. Across the Red River Delta, temples were built to honor the fallen. Songs passed through generations, carrying tales of courage, sacrifice, and the cleverness that outwitted the great Khan himself. Tran Hung Dao, though gone, remained a living presence. Statues were raised in his image, his name invoked in battle cries and prayers alike. To the Vietnamese, he became more than a general. He became the guardian spirit of the homeland. Legends grew around him. Some said he could command the rivers themselves. Others believed his ghost still watched over the waters of Bac Dong, waiting to protect his country once more should invaders return. The people lit incense and whispered his name before setting out to sea, as if to ask the river god's permission. Meanwhile, across the steppes, the Mongol Empire began to unravel. Kublai Khan's once vast dominion fractured into rival khanates, each vying for supremacy. The empire that had spanned from Poland to the Pacific Ocean disintegrated under its own weight. The dream of eternal conquest had ended not in battle, but in exhaustion. The seeds of that collapse were sown, in part, along the muddy banks of Vietnam's rivers, where arrogance met its reckoning. Dai Viet's victory didn't just safeguard its borders, it reshaped regional politics. Neighboring kingdoms like Champa and the remnants of the Song dynasty saw in Vietnam a new center of resilience and strategy. Trade flourished along the South China Sea, and envoys from distant lands came to the Tran court not as conquerors, but as partners. The same waterways that had once carried fire and blood now carried rice, silk, and stories. The world began to see Vietnam not as a small tropical outpost, but as a nation carved from defiance. But the greatest legacy of the Mongol invasions lay not in politics or power. It lay in philosophy. The Vietnamese learned that survival required adaptation. The terrain, the weather, and even the people's hardship became allies in defense. Every rice paddy, every winding river, every swampy delta had played a part in victory. That philosophy, using the land as an extension of one's will, would echo centuries later in Vietnam's long history of resistance. From the Ming invasions to the wars of the modern era, the same principle would resurface again and again. Victory belongs to those who understand the ground beneath their feet. It is impossible to look at the story of Dai Viet and not see the timeless pattern of history. The Mongols believed their empire was destined to rule the world. Their armies, fueled by discipline and fear, had never known defeat on such a scale. Yet the Tran kings, armed with nothing more than determination and cunning, proved that even destiny can be rewritten. The lesson of that war is simple but profound. Terrain and unity can defeat any empire that underestimates them. Even the Mongol chroniclers, reluctant to admit defeat, recorded the campaign with uncharacteristic humility. They described Vietnam as a country of rivers and ghosts, where the air itself seemed hostile and the people fought like spirits of the land. Rashid al-Din, the Persian historian, wrote that the Mongols entered a paradise that became their grave. The words may have been bitter, but they captured the truth. Dai Viet was not merely defending territory. It was defending an identity older and stronger than any empire could understand. As centuries passed, the legend of the Tran dynasty became woven into Vietnam's national fabric. Generations grew up hearing how their ancestors had stood against the most powerful empire in history. The story wasn't told with arrogance, but with quiet pride, the kind born of survival. It was a reminder that courage isn't always loud, and victory doesn't always mean conquest. Sometimes, the greatest triumph is simply not bowing. In Thang Long, modern Hanoi, an inscription from that era still echoes the spirit of those times. The mountains may crumble, the rivers may dry, but our nation will endure. It's more than a line of poetry. It's a promise. Every invasion, every hardship that came after carried the memory of those words. And every time foreign armies marched into Vietnam, they learned the same lesson that Uriyankadai and Togun had centuries before. The land remembers. The Vietnamese secret weapon was never just the land itself. It was the unity between people and place, the bond that turned every peasant into a soldier and every swamp into a fortress. The Mongols faced not a single army, but an entire ecosystem of resistance, alive, unpredictable, and impossible to subdue. In that sense, Vietnam didn't just win a war. It taught the world that no empire, however mighty, can outlast the will of a people who refuse to yield. Today, the rivers of Bac Dung still flow quietly, their waters calm but eternal. Fishermen cast their nets where once ships burned. Children play on the banks, unaware that beneath their feet lie the remnants of an empire that once sought to rule the world. The ghosts of that battle are long gone, but their message lingers in the whisper of the water. Freedom is born from endurance. If this story of how Vietnam defeated the greatest empire in history moved you, make sure to subscribe for more tales of forgotten wars and untold victories that shaped our world. Drop a comment below. Do you think the Mongols could ever have conquered Dai Viet? Or was this defeat inevitable from the start? Thanks for watching, and until next time, keep exploring the hidden frontiers of history.